my whole esophagus here and all down here was completely worn away, then I actually started to leak food. All of my food had to be liquidized. Seeing your dad break down and cry was the most painful thing ever. I'd actually had 2 endoscopies, which are a camera. Must have an eating disorder. Bad, they ended up putting me on a drip of morphine. Hello honeys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're just joining me now, then hi, my name's Imogen. Thank you so much for finding this video. Thank you so much for clicking on it, and thank you so much for finding me. I don't know how you found me, but please definitely stay. Today is part 3 of my storytime series about my stomach condition. So let's get in with it. Part 2 will be linked up here, and part 1 and part 2 will be linked in the description. If you want to go and check those out, they kind of make sense because we are following the start of my journey of my stomach all through hospital to the very end right now. You're going to want to watch part 1 and part 2 because this is a storytime series every Saturday at 5 PM, and I wanted to share this with you because it is my journey from the very beginning being diagnosed to going through getting different diagnosis in hospital, my hospital stay, and then also how I deal with my stomach today. I just wanted to quickly point out I'm not exactly addressing my stomach condition right now because that's the whole point of the storytime series. I wanted to show you the progression and how I got to my diagnosis. However, also I have a couple of conditions. I have quite a few conditions, so I don't want to just completely say them right now because I want to show you the complete journey. I have spoken about it in other videos, but I just wanted to say that you will find out, I promise, all of the conditions I have, but I just want to show you every single stage of how I got to where I am today. So in part 2 we ended with me being admitted to hospital. They said to my mum, and my mum had told me that it would only be 1 day. However, it actually turned out to be several months on this one ward. So I got admitted to the gastric ward, and it was the smelliest ward you've ever been on in your life. Like, if you think when you go to the toilet it smells, on a gastric ward, imagine however many people, 100 people on the ward, I don't know how many people are on the ward, 100 people being on the ward, men and women. It just stank. First night I was there, I couldn't sleep. I'd never been in hospital overnight on my own, and it was an incredibly scary experience, and anyone that's watching this that's in hospital or has been in hospital or has had to go into hospital for a 1 night or a couple of months or a long time, you will know it is the scariest thing, and you think you're so alone, you feel so dark because you feel so like, what is going on with my body, and you just don't feel right. It can really send you into quite a bad depression, and that's where I felt like I was at the very beginning, because obviously my dad lived in Brighton, my mum lived in the New Forest, and I was in London, and they both had lives themselves, so they couldn't be with me every single day, and visiting hours were only 4 till 8, so the whole morning you're just on your own. So I thought I was only going to be in there 1 day, so I was kind of like, okay, this is fine, tomorrow I'll get my results and I will be diagnosed with what I've got, and then they'll give me medicine and I will go away. I was quite naive to that, and I think that's quite a normal thing to feel like when you're in hospital, because I knew I wasn't dying, so I was like, oh, I must just have something they can't find at the doctor's, the hospital's going to find it, I'm going to take medication and I'll be out of here. Sweet. So then I had a specialist, and he shall not be named because he does not deserve to be named. He was vile. We get onto him quite a lot in this story time. However, at the very beginning they were really confused as to what was happening with me because they did all the normal tests that they would do for a stomach. So they took me, they made me drink this radioactive substance, and they traced it, and they were like, oh, it's fine, it's going through fine. They started me on antacids that were stronger, they started me on loads of different things, and nothing was getting better. If anything, I was getting progressively worse. I couldn't stomach anything. I had to drink all of my food. All of my food had to be liquidized, and it was stressful because I know this sounds horrible, but drinking food doesn't make you full. I had to drink these 3 drinks, and they were tiny, and they were like 500 calories. You're not full of that. You don't feel full. You feel so hungry. But then I was being sick, and it was just horrible. So when I spoke to the specialist, he asked me about my lifestyle and what I did, and I obviously told him straight off the back, I'm at university, that's why I wanted to sort this out so badly. I don't want to be in hospital, someone needs to spend a lot more than me. I explained that to him, and I explained that I was doing a musical theatre degree, to which point his eyes went wild, and he was like, ah, musical theatre, right, must have an eating disorder. That's honestly how it went down. He was like, oh right, so you do musical theatre. He was like, have you ever made yourself sick? I was like, no, I haven't. And he started to progressively ask me more questions about my eating habits and how long I've been dancing for. And I was like, I've been dancing since I was 3 or 4. You know, I've been dancing my whole life. He was like, have you been losing a lot of weight? I was like, no, I haven't been losing a lot of weight, actually. If anything, I'm more bloated and sort of round than I ever have been. And he was like, well, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get an eating disorders team to come to us and see you, because obviously you wouldn't tell us if you had an eating disorder anyway. You know, a lot of people want to suffer in silence and don't actually want to admit that they've got that. You know, in your head, you know when you're like, this is a waste of time, I'm going to be in hospital now for what turned out to be 3 weeks waiting for the eating disorders team. So a specialist eating disorders team had to come see me. And you know when you know in your head, this isn't me saying anything about eating disorders, but I knew I didn't have one. I knew I didn't have one. I ate very well. My dad was a chef growing up. I ate everything you put in front of me. Anything and everything. My parents always used to say my older brother was the fussy eater and I was the one that would just eat anything. Put it in front of Imogen and I would eat. That was my one thing. That was my thing. You know, like, I ate a lot. I ate all the chocolate. My parents had to hide the chocolate in the house from me because I was just demolishing chocolate like it was going out of fashion. So basically I waited for 3.5 weeks in a bed, being ill, getting progressively worse, having a drip in here, a drip in here, a drip in here, and a drip in here. So my meds were going this one in the morning, my meds were going this one in the afternoon, then this one was fluid continuously, and then this one was because this one eventually closed up and they wanted to get salts and other things inside me. Can't really remember too much of it. When the eating disorders team came to see me, I actually felt really bad for them because it was a waste of NHS time, it was a waste of taxpayers' money because they were coming to see me. But then on the flip side of it, I do understand as a doctor, as a specialist, as a GP, a person with an eating disorder might not want to admit it or might not think they have one. So I understand that they needed to tick it off. But you know, when it was frustrating in my head because I knew I didn't have one. So I was just like, this is a waste of time. But then it wasn't a waste of time for them probably, because if I did turn out to have an eating disorder, then they would have had to sort that out and sort the acid and stuff in my stomach, etc. So I understand why they had to do it, but it was just really frustrating because I was like, I promise you I'm not lying, I don't have that. And I think the more I protested I didn't have one, the more they were like, she definitely has an eating disorder, you know? And because I wasn't eating on the ward, that was being documented constantly, but I couldn't eat. I couldn't eat. This is what they would say to me, like, you're not eating. Some of the nurses, the evening nurses, they would be like, you're not eating, that's why, you've got a problem. And I'd be like, no, you have no idea. I can't keep food down. Like, it was so horrible to be told, you need to eat, you need to eat. I knew I need to eat, but I can't eat. I couldn't keep any food down and I was getting so sick because all that was coming up was acid, and the more I didn't eat, the worse it was for my stomach. But then if I did go to eat, I would just get really violently ill, which I'm not going to go into too much, but I would get very, very ill. And all of the time, I'm 20, I've never had something like this before. All in my head, I'm just going out of my mind. I'm worried and worried and worried being in hospital. I just felt so lonely, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I'm not going to pretend at the very beginning that I could deal with hospital because I couldn't. I wasn't dealing with it. I wasn't dealing with it. I just felt so lonely. I was so young on the ward. I was the youngest person on the ward, and I just kept seeing people come in, you know, leave, come in, leave, and I was still there. People would come in a couple of months later and I'd still be there, and they'd be like, you're still here? And I'm like, yes. Still here, hun. So eventually when the eating disorders team came, they checked me off and said, you definitely don't have an eating disorder. And I was really apologetic because I felt really bad. I was like, I'm sorry I've wasted your time. I'm sorry that this is... And they were like, no, it's good that we've come to see you. It's good that we've spoken because we can see you're not, and we need to check these things off. We need to just tick the boxes. So I was like, okay, amazing. So then in my head, I'm like, okay, finally now we can get to the grips of it. Now I'll be out in 2 days. They will find out what's wrong with me. And I think that wasn't great for me because I was so constantly thinking I was going to get out in a day, get out in 2 days, get out in a week, that when I wasn't, it was making me feel lower and lower. So by this point, I'd actually had 2 endoscopies, which are a camera that are on an end of a tube and it goes down into your throat and into your stomach. And you can have a colonoscopy, which I've had as well. I'll talk about that later. But at this point, I had 2 endoscopies. By this point now, how old I am, I've had so many endoscopies I can't even count. Like, I'm sure a lot of people with stomach things are watching this thinking I'm the same. I've had so many endoscopies, I couldn't even tell you how many. But at that time, there was 2. So they did one and they found an extreme amount of acid in my stomach, and they thought that maybe it had just been because I wasn't eating. So they put me on this plan of these drinks and these snacks that I could snack on. However, they were continuously coming up and I was getting sick and ill and sick and ill. So then they did another endoscopy because they felt like maybe that one was just a one-off. And then they realised that the acid in my stomach was on another level. It was actually basically eating away my stomach lining. It was completely destroyed. My whole esophagus here and all down here was completely worn away. It was just completely done with the acid. The acid was wearing away all of the lining. Hence the reason now my voice gets croaky because of the acid, but at the time my voice was so different. It was so different. By the endoscopies, they then realised, okay, there's something wrong here. There's something deeper than we need to find out. The specialist started to come and ask me more questions, and I had loads of junior doctors come to me in the morning, etc, etc, etc. And at this point, because the pain was so bad, they ended up putting me on a drip of morphine. That's when a lot of it goes blank for me because I was so drugged up that I couldn't really tell you what days were which days. At this point, I had really nice friends coming to visit me that I worked at Hollister with, and I'm still friends with them now, and they're lovely, and they came every day on their breaks, and they used to go out and work recruiting, so they'd actually just come and sit with me from 4 till 8 and just stay with me, and sometimes I'd be able to get earlier hours. I still talk to those girls now, and they're angels, and if it wasn't for them, I would have gone insane probably, because I needed them to keep me sane. I needed them, they'd come and plait my hair, and they'd come talk to me about everyday things, and I think it made me feel more normal. My parents would come up when they could, but obviously I didn't expect them because they had work. My little sister was very young at the time, my dad had work, my mum had work, so it was very hard for them to constantly pay to come up on trains. So I need to tell you this story. So one day my dad came up. I've got a couple of stories about my dad coming up to hospital. This one time my dad came up was actually one of the scariest times of my life, because they gave me an antispasmodic through my IV, which is an intravenous line, and the antispasmodic I was on a lot of, they actually put me up to a higher dose, and anything through your IV is a lot stronger. If you have paracetamol through your IV, it's a lot stronger than having paracetamol through tablets, because it goes straight to the veins, straight into the system, and works quicker and stronger and faster. So when I took this antispasmodic, they were like, oh, you might feel like you can't see. And I was like, huh? Sorry? You know when you're like, I really am not up for taking something where I feel like I can't see, and they were like, your sight will come back after a couple of minutes. So my dad's there, and they've given me this antispasmodic, and my dad and mum used to cry a lot, because I remember the first time my dad actually came in, because my mum had seen me admitted into the hospital, but the first time my dad came in was a really emotional time for me actually, because seeing your dad break down and cry when you're thinking, oh, my parents are going to be strong for me, but they're human. My dad came in and saw this drip, this drip, this drip, this drip, and also I had a drip through my nose at one point, a line going into my stomach, and he just broke down. He broke down. You know, his baby girl's got 4 drips coming out of her. I'm on this hospital bed. I look very, very ill, you know, sort of really wide in the face, completely pale. My lips, I'd got so many cold sores all over my lips. I'd got eye infections, which we'll go into a second. But seeing him, he just broke down and cried, and it was like, then I cried, because I was like, no dad, I'm gonna be fine, you know. Sorry, I'm just thinking about my dad, because it was really sad. It was a sad time, you know. I know I'm fine, but it was a really stressful and sad time. And seeing how much your parents love you and how it breaks them, you know, when me and Spencer have children when I'm older, and I look at my baby, if they're in pain, it's gonna ruin me. So I can't imagine what they were going through. My older brother actually couldn't come see me because he couldn't handle it, because it was just too stressful for him, and I completely understood that. And my little siblings didn't come and see me because I wouldn't want to put them through that. But going back to the story where I had the antispasmodic, put the antispasmodic, and within 2 minutes I'd lost my sight, and it was the scariest thing. I couldn't see a thing. I was screaming to my dad saying, I can't see, I can't see, I can't see, and after about 10 minutes it came back. But that was so scary. Another story about my dad was also there when they were asking me very detailed questions. So they were like, do you mind your dad being here? And I was so drugged up, I was like, yeah, whatever, dad's there, like, dad can listen, dad knows everything about me. And to be fair, me and my family are very close, they know everything about me, but maybe not all of these details. They had to ask me a lot of things about sort of my insides as well, which was weird. I don't really actually remember why they were doing that, but they were asking me about my sexual past. So they were like, when was the last time you had sex? It was like a year and a half I hadn't had sex at that point. Yeah, something like that, a year. At that point, my dad's probably thinking, she's a dream girl, she is a dream girl. Like, he's probably thinking, I love hearing this, that my daughter isn't going out and, you know, whatever, as a dad would, probably. And then they were like, does it hurt when you have sex? And I was like, my dad was like, I don't really need to be here for this, do I? And I was like, Dad, stay, it's fine, I need you here. Like, why would I put my dad through that? Why would I put my dad through that? My poor dad must have been sitting there like, I don't want to hear this. Do you know what I mean? But we've got some stories from these times. So then it got to this point where my boobs had swollen. I have like a 34B, whatever. I've never been measured, but I think it's that. That's the bra from Primark that I wear. But when I was in hospital, they'd swollen so much. And because of the hormone that was going through my body, they'd got to like a double D, I'd say. They were just so big for me. I've never been that big in my life with my boobs, and they were lumpy, they were full of lumps, so I had to go for a scan on the lumps, and that was even more scary. I was like, I'm here for a stomach thing and I've got this. And it actually got to the point where I had that much hormone going through my body that I actually started to leak from my breast area. I'm sorry if this is too much information, but I want to share every part of my journey with you. So that was one of the things I had. My mum actually said she went through this when she was 20, in her 20s, and my dad knew all about it because obviously they'd been together since they were 14. And my mum had said that she had extreme high levels of hormones, she still does now, and it got very bad for her when she was in her 20s. So this was just affecting my stomach more, because I don't really know the correlation between it, but hormones can really affect your digestive system. Hormones can really slow it down, it can become more sluggish. So all of that was just an amalgamation of how my stomach was really bad, and the lower I'd get and the more depressed I felt, the more my hormones would get worse, which would then have a knock-on effect on my stomach health and my gut health, my condition, because your liver is where all your hormones are held or something like that, and my liver started to not function properly because of all this. This is quite a funny part of the story. We've got to create some humour, huns. We can't dwell too much. We've got to have some humour. So I was really drugged up at the time, which was actually really sad, but I laugh about it now because I think I've got to find some positive and happiness from it. So they had junior doctors that would come in the morning all the time at 7 o'clock. Anyway, the night before I'd spoken to one of the GPs and I said, I've got this leakage from my breast area and I don't know what's going on. I was really worried, and I've already had tests for the lumps, and the lumps came back, they were fine. They were just fibroids. They were just lumps of cysty lumps. So I had loads of cysts in my chest area, like massive, like if you felt them you could move them, and I get them sometimes now when my hormones are playing up, because my hormones are very imbalanced, and I get them all up in here and they're horrible and they're really uncomfortable, etc. So then the next morning I'd woken up, and they'd woken me up at like 6:30 to clean my bed, or 7 o'clock, and I'd woken up. They were like, we're here to check about the discharge, because it was discharge from coming from here, and I was like, discharge, yeah. And they were like, do you mind if the junior doctors come in? I was like, don't worry about it, junior doctors can come in, yeah, fine. So there's about 5 people in this one room. They pulled the curtain, and I had lost the plot by this point. I thought discharge, I forgot that I'd had the chat with the specialist, and I thought discharge was from down there. So I just went, yeah, that's fine, what do you need to look at? And I've laid back on the bed, pulled my trousers down. They were like, no, sorry, no, actually, no, it was about the leakage in your breast tissue, the area. I was like, right, about that. Never felt more embarrassed in my life. Actually, I have. I don't really care. Whatever. When I have a baby, it's gonna all come out. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not gonna be a problem. I'm gonna be used to it by now, because I'm just like, yeah, whatever. If you've got to look here, there, everywhere, I'm not bothered. So at this point it got really bad, and they wanted to do another test where basically they put a tube in here, and the tube that they first put is really thick, and then they pull the tube out and they put the thin one in. It's the worst. That for me was the worst test I've ever had, ever. Basically, they wanted to test through a 48-hour period or 72-hour period the acid in my stomach, and sort of what happens to it and how it's going, etc, etc, etc. So I was like, okay, they wanted to see, you know, what the waves were of the acid and how much acid I have in my stomach. So I had to go to this other specialist unit, and they had to feed a tube, and it was such a long tube, and it was so thick. It was so thick. It was the size of my nose. And anyway, I'm sorry if no one likes things like this. There's no sickness I'm speaking about, but this is quite rank. So they put the tube in, and you have to lie on your side, and you have to keep swallowing water to swallow the tube. And she said to me, the worst thing you could do is cough. And I was like, it's gonna happen, isn't it? But you can't help but sneeze and cough when something this thick is being shoved down your throat. You know, you're gagging. So she's put it down, and I've just sneezed and coughed, and it's just come all the way out. And I was like, it was the most painful thing ever, because when they put it in, it pops in your nose, and then it goes through into your throat and into your stomach, and you're not on any medication through this time, so you are fully awake, and it's just horrible. You have to be awake to swallow the tube. So then when they got the big tube in, they then slot the thin tube in and pull the big tube out, and it was, honestly, my eyes were watering. That was the worst. And then when my dad came in again and my mum came in again, I had these tubes in my nose and then all of these drips. That was when they broke down again, because they were like, my baby really isn't very well at all. So when they did that test, the results came back, and the results were really, really bad. And this is where everything started to get a little bit worse. And that is the end of the story time. I wanted to leave you on a cliffhanger. I feel like it's a bit of EastEnders moment, you know, dun, dun, and hopefully then you want to come back for the next episode of this story time. So from 20 to 27, I've got so many story times about my stomach, because it has been a journey for the last 7 years. You know, it hasn't been an easy journey, and I really want to share that with you guys. And I really hope that these story times help you, angels. I hope that they give you a light relief from what's going on at the moment, for you to be distracted by something. I also hope that they'll help people know that you're not alone. Whatever you're going through, I'm always going to be here with you. And I also want you to know that just because I'm on YouTube doesn't mean I don't go through things things all the time. Everyone goes through something every day, and I'm fighting a secret hidden illness. You know, a lot of people would know that I've got this if you were to see me on the street, unless you'd see me in a really bad way on the street when I've become very ill. But I just want you to know that everyone is fighting a battle, and please don't judge other people for maybe being a certain way, because you really don't know what they're fighting at home. You really don't know what they're fighting internally, physically. You don't know. So let's try and be less judgmental. Let's try and stick through all of this together. And I love you guys so much, and I will see you next Saturday. I upload every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Join my family of Huns. I'd be so grateful if you gave this video a massive like button, and I will see you on Tuesday. I love you guys so much. Until next time, I'm gonna love you and I'm gonna leave you. Bye. You're not alone. I love you. Bye.